I think that if we look at some of the scaling curves and imagine them being, continue to increase just a few more years, we're not talking decades here, and making some extrapolations from the capabilities of technology that is already available, we are set to be on a path to see really some amazing but also worrisome things happening, and we should start to prepare for that.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Sahil from the Engati team, and today we have a great customer experience expert with us on the show today. But before I introduce you to our guests, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, available across 14 channels with 3,500 solutions created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guests. Boris is the head of AI Artificial Intelligence at Comtrade Digital Services, a provider of software engineering services and solutions. He oversees the delivery of AI projects and the company's AI-related R&D activities. He's also one of the mentors at TechStarts Montreal, an AI accelerator that focuses specifically on startup companies advancing the development and application of artificial intelligence across industries and markets. Welcome, Boris, to the podcast. And
hi, Sahil. Thank you for inviting me.
So I'll just go to the first question. We all hear a lot about AI taking over the world via the media and through Elon Musk and through other thought leaders in the business folks. But what the business folks and the developers are more interested to know are what are the next AI breakthroughs in the AI industry.
So currently in AI there are many parallel things that are happening. So it's kind of difficult to point out a single breakthrough that has happened or will happen soon, but there are a few that are really worth mentioning at this point in time. So one of them is definitely what is happening with language models. So basically models that are capable of generating text. There has been really a huge advancement in this area recently. So another one of kind of areas is everything related to the capability of actually generating, generating things with AI, so being kind of creative. And also there's a huge push in scaling of existing AI capabilities, so both in terms of hardware that is more and more capable, the algorithms which are ever more efficient, and also, very importantly, the amount of money that companies are willing to spend on, for example, training a single individual model. And all these things will have a really huge impact in the near future.
Correct. And you mentioned language generation models and creative generation of such stuff. So is that something that is something that's the holy grail of development of such projects, right? And what my specifically next question would be around something called GPT3, which is such one of these models, and what can help us to accomplish, and can you talk more about that?
Of course. So GPT3 is basically a latest, at least publicly known language model. It is extremely large. It has more than 175 billion parameters. It was developed by a US company, OpenAI, which is quite well known. They are one of the companies which have set themselves a goal of actually trying to develop a general AI system and making it in a way that benefits as many people as possible. So regarding the GPT-3, so why is it so important? So actually, I would say that it is a first glimpse that we maybe got of a system that is kind of general. So since it is so large and it has been trained on such an extremely large corpus of text, it has developed this ability that is called meta learning. So this means that when the model gets a context window, so the previous text that it sees, that it is able to actually learn in context from this text using all the knowledge that it gathered in pre-training on this larger corpus of text. And it enables it very interesting things. So it is, of course, it can be quite creative. It can generate text from news articles, poetry, emails, but it can also be used for question answering. It can be used to kind of transfer the style of text from one style to another, or it can be used to make summaries of documents. And what was especially interesting to me was the ability to maybe not only make a summary, but also to tailor the summary to a specific audience. So you might take a complex text and write a summary that would be readable and understandable to maybe a child or a teenager, for example, or someone who hasn't got the technical competence in the area. And one thing that I think this model will make a big impact on is chatbots and all kinds of digital assistants. So I had the privilege of having access to the model in closed beta, and I can say that I've never before had such interesting conversations with an AI system. It's a really interesting experience when you see that some AI language model has, for example, made you laugh, or to see the stories that it creates, and you really want to find out what happens next. So nothing like that I've had have experienced before.
So in future, we could be watching movies that are co-written, and the screenplay has been entirely written by a bunch of AIs. Like one.
No, I mean, no, it's something. Already? Yeah, it's something that it already does. So, for example, in the beginning, you can write a description of different characters, and then maybe start off a dialogue with some prompt, and it continues the dialogue seamlessly. And it is very, very sensitive to the initial context that you give it. So you can influence the dialogue to be funny, or things like that.
Like as you mentioned, the ability to even tweak it is to the specific audience as per their preferences. So you can use it to write a Bollywood blockbuster as well as a Hollywood blockbuster too. So like
yes. I mean, it also. I mean, it has been trained on such a large amount of information. It really knows its movies very well. So basically, you could ask it about any movie that was recorded, and probably would get quite interesting answers. Or you can ask it to summarize movies.
Write fan fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that the first day that I've gotten access to the model, I actually kind of couldn't sleep the night afterwards, because I was so surprised that this level of capability has already been achieved. Personally, I thought that it was still a few years off, and I think that's the sentiment shared by many other people as well.
Wow, that's very interesting to hear, sir. So a few months back, you were invited by the Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet to talk about how AI will impact for the real world individuals. And can you throw a light about that same conversation somewhere for our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So in my talk there, I was focusing a bit on digitalization. So the whole process of digitalization, we always talk about it, and it's mostly concerned with how to take some processes and information from the real world in which we live in, and transfer them to some environment, some database where we can work with this data easily, right? But I think that where the core things in AI development are focused currently is basically moving in the other direction. So basically not keep AI reserved in this digital space, but make it a bigger part of our, real world processes, interactions, and so on. And this is happening in many different ways. So, for example, instead of us having to enter data manually from the real world, we now have systems which are able to perceive the world around us, through cameras or other sensors, and basically put this information automatically in the digital form. Also, we have a possibility now of having much easier interactions with AI systems, as we already discussed during today's interview. The various digital assistants, chatbots, or however they will be called in the future, are starting to make real change. And also, it's not just perceiving our environment, but also the capability of imitating it. So basically, either generating images or sounds or other things that we can then observe in our environment. And then, in a way, a final boundary of that is, of course, also AI systems having the ability to interact with the environment, not just through us, but independently. And this is, of course, a field covered by robotics, and definitely will be one of the next revolutions happening based on that. However, there's a lot of questions relating to this merging of AI with the real world, and big problem can be, of course, privacy issues and issues of control. So who has actual control over all this technology, all this data? So here I really hope that basically we will develop systems that will also protect the individual. So to empower individual people by giving them more control over in what way they interact with other systems, how much data they share. And here I think AI will have to play a huge role, because at some point the only way to compete with AI systems will be using other AI systems. So if we have on one hand systems from big tech companies that are always capable of following us and analyzing the data about us, on the other hand, we will require systems that are capable of keeping our privacy and making sure that it is our goals and intentions, the ones that are followed, and not that we are just subject to intentions of others.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a big debate around minds of a lot of people around privacy. And with AI coming into the bunch, a lot of people are not even sure what to expect. And yeah, there's a lot of confusion. And I think probably some kind of blockchain technology along with AI could be the answer here. But yeah, that's just me while guessing.
Yeah, it's one possible way of thought about that is using decentralized systems, maybe to cover some of the incentives. I'm not sure what the answer is to this one, but I do hope that we are able to discover it rather soon before things get even worse.
Correct. Coming to the recent events of the reality that we all live in, which is the COVID-19. So it'll be criminal if I won't ask a question related to that. So how do you think the AI has contributed in the COVID research regarding to the vaccination? And how effective can the help of AI, or how crucial can it be during times like these, where we are just fighting against the time, and any resource that can help us suits the matter, I guess.
Yeah, so thank you. A very interesting question, and one that was that had a bit of a controversy recently. Some people are saying that AI didn't really help us with the crisis at all. That it is a kind of proof that AI systems underdeliver. I have a bit of a different viewpoint on this. So we first have to look at what are actually the areas where where AI could really, contribute, right? So I see two main areas, right? So one is basically helping doctors and medical personnel in their work, right? In their day-to-day work with patients. And another area is, in helping to develop a vaccine, or or to at least create better medicines or something like that. And in both areas are very considered a very kind of critical application. So at least commercially, a lot of companies decided to not follow the path of trying to develop these critical applications because it is difficult to actually deploy them in practice. There's maybe too much focus on applications that are not such critical areas. For example, there are really, I think, a bit too many data scientists currently working maybe in advertising, right? Because it's not such a big deal if you make maybe if you show up a wrong ad, right? But when we are dealing with human lives, it's a bit of a different story. So obviously, also before the whole coronavirus crisis, I mean, if we look at how much money actually was poured into developing AI systems in life sciences and in health industries, it wasn't that much compared to other industries. And also some of the problems that I've described are such that would be, really well served by the technology that is only just emerging now. So if we take a look at, day-to-day work of doctors, medical personnel, here robotics will make a huge impact. But robotics is maybe at this very moment not just quite there, but really approaching that point very rapidly. And also, for example, in development of medicine or scientific discoveries, here obviously language models will play will create a huge impact, right? But it's the biggest one and the most important one yet, GPT-3. It only actually came out during the summer, right? So I think we'll have to wait for some time before we see this impact translate into real. Real world use cases. However, it won't take much time, right? It's more measured in months rather than years or decades.
Yeah, these are hard problems to solve. So, yeah, definitely. I would also, the next question would be related to a very similar to the AI part, where I would like to ask you that which industries do you think are, the next majorly impacted by AI? These could be the industries which could go up, which could go down, which could severely see, the way that they operate completely transformed, as in the promise of electricity, that what electricity basically did to a lot of human labor, but humanity eventually found its way. So what do you think about AI?
So I think that AI currently has become such a horizontal type of technology that it's really basically difficult to say that it will be limited or it will create the biggest impact in this and these industries, and those others won't be so much impacted. So maybe I will take a bit two different viewpoints on this. So first one is in terms of the size of the businesses that will benefit from AI. So I think that the cost of entry now into using AI technology has dropped a lot. It has become much easier to apply this technology into business processes. It will become much more easier using some of the technologies, for example, like GPT-3, which I haven't mentioned before, but it's actually quite good at generating computer code, among other things. And also regarding areas such as automated machine learning, so AutoML solutions, which basically enable you that you don't really always need a big team of data scientists to develop models. So this will definitely be one area. And another viewpoint is regarding specific technologies that will have an impact. So all of it was focused on working with structured data, on using predictive analytics, machine learning, and things like that. So one area that definitely should reconsider now is everything that's relating to language. And there is a lot of language tasks almost in practically any business. So there was this, so the early adopters of chatbots, I mean, there was a bit of a disappointment there a few years ago. And now today definitely is a good thing, good point in time to reconsider that experience and maybe try again using the latest tech. Also, regarding anything that deals with being creative, right? There's this whole notion that AI at this point in time is not really creative, cannot be creative, and that creative work should only be reserved for humans. And I think this has started to change, and is again one area that many businesses should take into account. Like how do they create content, whether it's for advertising, whether it's for training, whether it is to communicate with customers. So definitely this would be one other area, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you. And any other thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so maybe one thing that I would like to kind of underline is how important it is that we also try to build some safeguards into AI related technologies. So there's a lot of talk about AI winter happening, that kind of this technology will soon reach its limits, and maybe we shouldn't be that worried about it. I think that if we look at some of the scaling curves and imagine them being continue to increase just a few more years, we're not talking decades here, and making some extrapolations from the capabilities of technology that is already available, we are set to be on a path to see really some amazing but also worrisome things happening, and we should start to prepare for that. And I'm not thinking of just about how to control this technology so it isn't used for bad purposes, but also to look very much into how to achieve greater equality in our society. Because I'm not really in that camp of people who think that there will always, no matter how sophisticated technology we develop, there will always be room for work, and now we are worried about that. What happens if people are out of work? So if we manage to achieve transformation in our society to make it more equal, we will not see this as a problem. We will see it as a kind of a liberation. And this is actually what we should be thinking of and working on as well when dealing with AI systems.
Thank you, Boris. Thank you so much for that perspective. I personally feel enlightened by the way that you think about it and how we should think about that. There were certain things that you mentioned that a lot of people mentioned, and I was part of that crowd, I'm afraid. So thank you so much for that. Your insights were really valuable, and I know our audience is going to enjoy this interview a lot. Thank you.
So
We'll be back. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sahil, for inviting me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. We'll be back with new episodes and with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you.